Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Akosh. I'm your host and the host of Airtime Webinars. Airtime Webinars is a bi-weekly series of discussions with research and product leaders about the nitty-gritty details of building products. Now, today I'll be talking to Shannon about the silent product killers. She is the CEO of Usersnap, which helps digital products turn customer feedback into powerful insights. What you need to know about Shannon is that she's a seasoned product leader with a career spanning over 20 years at companies like BlaBlaCar or Acquia. She's also an active mentor and lecturer at Product School or Women in Product. Before we kick things off and kick off our discussion with Shannon, there are a couple of things I want to share with you. Like, first of all, if there's any problem with the audio or video, please put it in the comments. If it's all fine, just put a thumbs up there, and then we know you're around and you can hear us well. The second thing is, if you want to get the latest webinar recordings, watch these past episodes, or just be easily notified about upcoming webinars, then you can follow me on YouTube. I'll put the YouTube channel link in the comments in a second. If you have any questions throughout our discussion, the best way to do that, you don't have to wait until the Q&A. Put your question in the comments, and I'll make sure that I'll curate, and I'll make sure that I throw all these balls in Shannon's direction. What has worked really well for me in the last months is a very simple MVP upvoting system. So if you see a question that you really like, put also a thumbs up there. And the more thumbs up I see, the better I know which are the more relevant questions for you. All right. Last thing, if you want to do a background check on us or just want to get in touch after the webinar to continue the discussion, I'll put Shannon and my LinkedIn contact details in the comments as well. And Shannon, I think I talked way too long, so I'm gonna drop the mic in a virtual sense. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm indebted that you accepted my invitation. And let's kick things off by hearing a little bit about yourself and all the amazing things that you've worked on.
Oh, thank you so much. That's such a warm welcome and a great introduction, and just happy to be here. Really excited to talk to you. We had such a fun conversation, even just
Oh,
talking
we
about
did.
topics before. We were like, we could talk about this, we could talk about this. So I feel like it was a good match even from the start, like just finding fun things to talk about and having a smart person to talk about them with. So thanks for having me on.
I blush
Um,
easily, so
yeah. Well, we have that in common. High five. So I do think that as far as talking about me, I'm bad at it. So I'll talk about Usersnap. I'm really excited. I'm really excited about what we're doing. We're definitely taking this company in a new direction with a really different value proposition coming your way. So watch this space. When we talk about growth killers, I mean, a lot of companies are struggling because of AI. They're struggling because of the competition increasing. They're struggling because of new value propositions that are coming out, which are much more accessible. And I think Usersnap is definitely in the middle of that battle. So it's a great time to have AI at your fingertips because it pushes you to do new things, and that's exactly what we're doing. So it's really cool to feel like in this company that has 10 years of history and customers and software that's been well maintained and is super clean and a fabulous team behind us, I get to reinvent a big chunk of this. So it's the coolest time to be in this company. I'm really stoked. I'm very, very stoked about it.
and happy to hear that. Happy to hear that. And let's just use this as a segue to jump into the deep water and talk about silent killers. You also mentioned silent killers, and I want to clarify for the audience why I'm saying silent killers. And I call these silent killers because these are product decisions where we don't necessarily we don't see an immediate negative impact when we make these decisions. So these negative impact materialize down the road. And two, they often seem like good choices at a time and reasonable choices. And I can give you an example about a personal one at Airtime. We at one point decided to tweak our to focus on tweaking our wow feature, saying like thinking that okay, if this is the wow, it's going to convince users to pay, to upgrade, and use that. But then as we built that, we continuously got the feedback that it's just a struggle to upload all the video materials into our product. So we built a valve feature, which seemed like a reasonable choice at the time, but we were missing the integration. So
Mm.
people really make use of that. And of that feature. Now, that's my personal story. I was wondering if you have some product decisions from your
Yeah.
past. You have some stories where you thought like, okay, this is the right direction. This is what we should be doing. And later on, you realize, whoops.
Yeah, I mean, there was a really obvious one actually when I came into Usersnap that they had been looking at really seriously. Like they were going to make a huge investment in this feature. I won't say what it is, but I will say how it went. So, like, I've only been here for 6 months, so I still have to earn my stripes. I still have to, like, you know, prove that I know what I'm talking about. So it was quite a battle actually as a new leader coming into an organization. And the first thing I did was like, well, that project is dead. But like they had planned to do this big project. Um, and one of the first things that they mentioned was like, oh yeah, we did some early user testing on it. And it was like not really that valuable, but we're gonna build it because we've, really invested in it. I'm like, no, you're not. So in this case, it was one that I kind of did a timeout on and said, "Tell me why this, why now?" And it's definitely been a good thing that we didn't go down that road because I think we would
How
have.
did you know? How did you know? Did it take a person to come from the outside to see that,
I think
or
so. I think a lot of companies invest in the idea. And when you're invested in an idea, then you have a hard time saying no to it. It becomes a little precious. Like we don't want to say no to something that you spent 100 hours thinking about. And this is also, I think, why feedback is so important because it cuts down the emotional attachment to things. It's not my opinion that matters, it's my user's opinion that matters. So when we were looking at this product, how did we know that it wasn't going to be the right thing? Well, two big things. Number one was the feedback wasn't good. That was an obvious one for me. I'm like, we're a feedback company, people. We did get good feedback on this. Like, don't do it. And then the second thing was I did just a smidge of market research. Who out there is already doing it? And like what's that look like in the grand scheme of functionality? Is it innovating? And something that I try to do in all of our products, and I'm working on an article for the product compass on this, so I won't share all of it right now, but I do think that there are critical things that you have to validate before you go pursue something. And in this case, it wasn't perceived as a critical functionality. It wasn't differentiated or innovative in the market, so it wasn't novel. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, that's something that everyone does. And we wouldn't do it quite as well as everyone else. And they said it wasn't critical. So for me, it was like those three things just kind of made it really obvious that we could spend 6 months building this big feature set, but it wouldn't solve a critical problem for the user. So why bother? Right. And I think a lot of companies get kind of caught up in their process of, I think this is cool. I think I should build it. I spend a lot of time thinking about it, dreaming about it. And so then even if I get some negative feedbacks, I'm still wanting to do it. And I had to kind of break that feeling of
yeah?
attachment.
But then it is it is being an outsider. It's the process that you described to me is a little bit like being in Vegas and playing poker, and then the more you're losing, the more you're invested in that process, right? And then the less inclined you are to pool and just because you already invested time in thinking about it, meetings, research, and everything. So to pull the plug, it means that you like literally say, okay, that was it's not a waste of time because
Yeah.
you learned something that you shouldn't build, but it feels
Yeah.
like a waste of time that you could have researched something that is more valuable
Right.
for
I'm really
customers.
I'm much more now in the vein of like fast assumption testing. Which is, I use my LinkedIn all the time for that. I just maybe reach out to people in my network. I reach out to our customers as well. I've got a little internal SaaS group, user testers, that people who are willing to give us fast feedback on things. And hey, what do you think about this? Is this a problem for you, or is it doesn't matter to you? And like, I think it's really important to have those channels. And when I want to do a bigger test that's more validating, I will use Usersnap and have many times since I've started here already, which I find really helpful. But I'm kind of moving away from this like previous process of let's spend a lot of time in discovery and let's spend a lot of time like, you know, imagining the solution. And I spend a lot more time just talking to customers and talking to users. Makes it so much easier. And another example that we have in that same vein, which which we are debating actually, is like these small fixes. Like, are they really worth it? I think that's one of the things that does really hold companies back is like a small change oftentimes has a small impact. And I think it was our head of product at Stats Group, Daniel, who also has said this to me. So I want to make sure I attribute
Yeah.
this insight to him because when he said it to me, I was like, yeah, that's true. And it really made me think a lot. I think that when you are doing little teeny tiny tweaks, it's a trap a lot of teams fall into where they're like, oh, yeah, 10 customers asked for a fix to our filters. Should we do it? And if it's like, yeah, there's a bunch of people asking for it, we have a little bit of time in the roadmap, why don't we? But what I think people don't realize is that they're saying no to something that could be really high value. Like you could make a bigger investment that you've hopefully validated the assumptions and need and criticality around, but you could be making a really big impact. I think too many teams, and maybe historically at Usersnap, it was like a lot of we'll just tweak this and we'll just make a tiny change here.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to really push the team to like look for big impacts for users, find big pain and find big impacts. And I think that doing the opposite leads to a very slow death,
Good.
essentially.
And also building that feature will generate new feedback about that filter. No, that you will
Yeah.
again continue fixing because it's never done. So
Yeah.
yeah, it takes
And
also future bandwidth from the team.
exactly. And I think a good book on that I'm enjoying is Matt LeMay's Impact Teams. And he's written other, good things around low impact death spiral, he calls it, which I think is such a good name. Because it really is the crux of the problem that you're not solving by doing this, like, oh, we did this, and then they said they wanted a small tweak, and so we did a small tweak, and then they said they wanted a small tweak, and so we did a small tweak. And pretty soon you're just iterating on this tiny little feature instead of getting ahead in the market and building something innovative and new and valuable and exciting. And that's the kind of product work that I really want to do. I want to do stuff
Hmm.
that is groundbreaking and that people are wowed by. I don't want to do small little tweaks, which like we do those, but we do them in our cool down cycles. We have 2 weeks after every month long cycle that's devoted to the little stuff, that's not big bang things, but, like, the month-long cycles that we do in the quarter, they really do get more high impact things, and I think that's, like, my first tip is don't do low
Hmm.
impact stuff or you'll slowly
So
die.
like low, if I let me just take it to an abstract level. I'm looking for characteristics of slow or silent killers, and one of the characteristics that I picked up is low impact. It's not that
Mhm.
important for customers. Do you see other important characteristics? Because what I'm alluding to later on is how to recognize when you're making a silent killer decision.
Yeah, I think, not building for your ideal customer profile or not building in a way that's attached to your strategy is another way that you can be
Okay.
slowly kind of killing your product. So I'll give you a concrete example. There's an item in our backlog right now that we were just scoring earlier today. I have a score set that I do, and it makes me think. It's not like a hard decision. It's just something
Hmm.
that makes me think. So I was scoring this. I'm like, oh, it actually scored really low because it's not that tied to our strategy, and it's like it's not that urgent. Could probably wait. And like doing it is a choice that I'm going to make for the team because it's a morale win. Like it's a fun project for them. Um, but you better believe in the next cycle that I'm going to plan, it's going to be all high impact stuff because I'm making a little bit of a dip in the impact. So doing things that are, and this one is not related to our strategy, and it's not really for our ideal customer profile. It's not really for the key persona that we're building for, which is product people. So I feel like I'm deviating a little bit from my strategy right now with this one project. Now, it's a small project, but still, it like irks
Yep.
me. And I can see that as a trait of like if I were to make that a habit of not keeping the focus on what is the purpose of what we're trying to build, what is our immediate goal that we're trying to achieve, and who is it for, and what is the pain that we are trying to solve. If I'm not really focused on that, it's really easy to lose your way, and pretty soon you're just building stuff that's not focused on your ideal customer profile, and then they stop coming to you because you're not solving their pain and you're not focused on them. So I would say
Mhm.
like building low impact things, not building for the strategy that is tied really firmly to your ICP. Of course you're going to break the rules sometimes, but don't make it a habit. If you are making a habit of it, your product will slowly die.
Yeah. So you, at the end of the day, they have some sort of a scorecard, right?
Yeah.
Where and then I give you an example. Like
The
when we
process.
thought when we thought about which features to build, we had 6 dimensions at airtime. We looked at, okay, is this something that the competition already has, or is it truly differentiating us? Do we have the expertise to build this feature really well? And so on and so forth. And then we looked at like weighted averages and just saw how things scored. Do you have something similar?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's actually starting out the same way. I mean, there's the typical stuff like, is it
Yeah.
viable? Is it feasible? Is it ethical? Like, there's the questions, what I call the Marty Kagan five, like the classic questions that people ask themselves. But when I was working in my backlog, I used to like put those in columns and be like, let's rate them. But it wasn't actually helping me make decisions. I had different questions in mind, and I posted about this on LinkedIn. But my approach is, first of all, is it having the right impact? Number one, like, is it tied to my strategy? Is it for my user? Is it really making a difference in their life? Am I solving enough pain? So, like, thinking about pain in terms of, is it like the frequency? Is it felt a lot by the
Yeah.
right audience? And is it something that they really feel strongly in its intensity? Is it very frequent and very intense and for the right audience? Then I'm like, this is the right thing to worry about in terms of impact. If it's a really low intensity but comes up all the time, people just don't care about it that much. Honestly, it might come up a lot, but it's kind of one of those things where it just becomes annoying. So I think about impact first, and I
Mhm.
get rid of anything that's low impact. Is just not worth my time to even think about with the rest of the categories. So I get rid of that stuff first. I think about feasibility as well. So you mentioned like, do we have the expertise? I think about, does my team have the skill set? Do we have the tools? Do we have the means to deliver on this? Or am I being too like stars in my eyes, too excited about something that's just not like my feet aren't on the ground here and we can't build it? I also think about the frequency of like, which is essentially the reach. How many customers, what types of customers? Sometimes I'll even do a back of the napkin, like MRR, like if these
Mhm.
10 enterprise customers are all asking for it and it's worth this much and I invest this much, like is the ROI there? I think about it in that way sometimes if I'm not 100% sure about the frequency and is it worth the impact. Sometimes we'll do the math from a financial perspective. And the last thing I think about is maybe this like urgency question. Can it wait? How long could it wait? What happens if it waits? Another way of thinking about that is cost of delay. If I delay, how
When
much
you
does this
say
cost me?
can it wait, is it do you mean like can it wait for the customer? Like, is it something that the customer just needs to have today? Like an
Yeah.
accountant. You need to have an accountant if you're a company because somebody has to do the books at the end of the month.
Mhm. Exactly. So like if this feature were not delivered, what does my customer feel about it? Are they like, this sucks, it cannot wait another day, fix it? Or is it like, I wish you would do this, but like it could wait a month or it could wait a quarter. And those things all get, weighted for us. And then after I've done some scoring, I actually have a couple of other what I call balancers. So
Mhm.
I look at a few things like, is it internal or is it customer facing? Because sometimes you have to do the internal stuff and you want to balance between those things. And I look at, is it more retention or is it maybe more acquisition or is it both? And I want to balance between things that attract and things that retain. And then I look at also, there's a couple other things I look at. I'm trying to think what makes sense. I just try and check all the balances. Oh, is it innovation or iteration? Am I bringing something new and novel, and do I have enough of that? Versus making sure that things that I've already shipped are getting some love and are being improved, and I'm not just like doing a thing and then not touching it for a year. So there's some balancing act that happens, but I want to do the first round and get rid of all the stuff that might be low impact or could wait before I think about balancing out, because it helps me to focus the work essentially. So that's my process.
Amazing. When we think about, or when I think about these silent killers, I'm also thinking about like an alarm system. Yeah. Are there any KPIs
Yeah.
that you've used in the past, or that maybe you're using right now, that are
Um,
giving you a hint constantly, or a pulse check whether certain decisions maybe that you made, but at least indicating that, okay, they're not taking the product in the right direction?
yeah, there's a bunch. So the first thing I look at, and this is actually one of my first projects when I got to Usersnap, is, are we attracting our ideal customer profile? First of all, like, are they signing up for our product? We're a PLG product, so the sign up process is pretty obvious, right? We can see who's in a trial and who converted. It's easy. But we didn't have a means of knowing, is the person that we want signing up. So we had to do an internal project really quickly in Q4 to be like, okay, how do I find out if this is the right person? So we had to change our onboarding process and the profiling process. We had to change our internal BI. We had to change our tracking in order to be able to see, are we getting our target audience? So I think if you're not getting your target audience, that's a really good indicator that you're off track. Um, it
And
could also be,
you gather that segmentation information in the onboarding process, right? So
yes.
I don't know, maybe you didn't ask, or you before you did not ask about job title, and now you added it as an optional field. It's just a made up
Mhm.
example, but is this the kind of changes that we're talking? Okay.
Yeah, one of the key examples of what we were missing was actually the size of the company. So
Hmm.
we work a lot with mid-market. We do have enterprise customers. We do have startups. We work a lot with the mid-market because they feel the pain of what we're trying to do the most. But we didn't have a means of like finding out. We would have to like go and look at the company and then do external research, like, what is this company? How big are they? And that was such a waste of time. So I'm like, okay, let's just ask them right in the beginning. It takes them one extra question. It's so easy. Our roles were also a little bit like hard to discern in some ways. So we changed the role. The goals were also very feature focused, and I didn't like that. It didn't help me understand what they were trying to do
Achieve.
and what
Yeah.
their pain was. It told me which feature they were trying us out for. And what I really wanted to know is, what is their goal? What are they trying to solve? So we changed around some of those questions that I could be like, okay, draw a circle around these people. These are the ones we want. Can we match? And so we just started that process. And I think it's really helpful to understand what's going on. A second thing that I look for is, like, they're obviously that conversion rate. So not only just the sign up rate and are you attracting them, but how many are converting is a second
Hmm.
one. So you might attract a ton. And in PLG, we see this a lot because you're opening your doors to everybody. So maybe you're attracting your ICP, but your product is not compelling enough for them to actually convert. So that's a second KPI that you definitely want to watch for. You can also look at the rate of growth. So like, are you attracting enough, not just the right people? And are they converting, but is it enough growth? If you have slow growth and flat growth for a really long time, I think that's a bad sign for the product. It shows that you are not attractive enough, essentially. And maybe the last one and the big effort that we've been putting a lot of time and energy in is analysis on churn. And it's great to have the central team at SAS Group, the data people there, awesome. So I can say like, look, this is the chart that I want, and I want it to like show this kind of line. This is the data that I pulled, and this is, the fields that I'm looking at, and this is over time what I want to see. But essentially, it had three things: who's churning, which package types, which customer types, like what's the segment that is churning,
Mhm.
how much are they churning? So should I even care about this? Is it enough MRR that I should be like, oh? And then also the last one is what's the trend over time? And so I think the last one is maybe the most interesting because it tells you if you're on a bad trend or not. So at Usersnap, it was very like up and down. So we don't really have a trend, and we do have also very high reactivation rates. People will churn because they finished whatever they're doing and they don't want to pay for 3 months, and so they're like, and then they come back. So our churn is really hard to analyze in that way, and it's very up and down, um, depending on what type of person it is, which is also why we
Yeah.
want to focus more on product and less on, developers or other teams that are just going to be like one-off projects, whereas product managers are much more cyclical and need continuous feedback and continuous discovery. I think that that's way more interesting as a target audience. So I would look at your churn and see what is the trend overall, because that's really interesting. So low growth, a churn that's increasing, your ARPU that's going down. These are all three things that really indicate your product is in trouble.
Yeah. I want to go back to your first point because you mentioned that you had a point in the onboarding process where you asked about which feature attracted you. That was the setup earlier on. And when you mentioned that, I thought, well, isn't this how I sign up? When I sign up for tools, there's typically one feature. Like there are hundreds of
Yeah.
features that each tool have, and there's one feature which I really need, and I sign up for that. And then later on, I may use other features as well. But that's so to say a trigger. Um, is it? Are you still tracking this in any way, or did you put it on the umbrella of goals and understanding how like certain features bring you closer to achieving a goal?
We're doing it in like stealth mode. So
Hmm.
we find out what is their role and what is their goal. So who are you and what are you trying to do with this product? And then we can look at the activity. We can see which features, which like template types are getting the most usage. And that tells us, oh, so this role plus this goal means that they wanted to do this. And it influences us in terms of the behavior that we can expect from that combo. And we do a warm onboarding process where we say like, if you are this person and you have stated that this is your goal, we think you're most likely to want to use these things, and so we'll reduce your decision making time and suggest, and reduce your customization, and just say like, here, this is the paved path that we've seen work really well and that a lot of customers use, so try this instead of, you know thinking for 3 days which type of solution do I need. So we do look at that, and it's really helpful. And we can track it in terms of the success rate. If we suggested something, did they try it and did
Hmm.
they convert? And that is actually one funnel that we monitor to see if the growth is going in the right direction.
Oh, nice. And then you can correlate with the segmentation data that you collected in the very beginning and verify if that's really a track for a certain profile.
Mhm.
Amazing. Shannon, we've been chatting now for almost 30 minutes. I
Oh my
just want to
god.
have a quick shout out to the audience that in case you have any questions, you have a problem, you have a riddle that you want to pose to Shannon, this is the right moment. Um, please put it in the comments. Until I see the first question popping up, I have a few more in my stash, so I'm gonna pull them out one by one. And what I'd like to talk about is that more often than not, products and software companies find themselves in phases when their product growth is gone and that velocity is slowing.
Mhm.
Um, my question is, do you have some sort of a framework that you use to understand the root causes? Because could be so many things. It could be,
Mhm.
churn, could be the onboarding, could be the competition. Maybe you're on the right track with your product, but the competition just pulled a rabbit out of the hat. So, so do you have an approach that you use to understand where this slower growth is coming from?
I think that you just touched on some of it. Like, you have to look at the market. But I mean, okay, the go-to is just talk to your customers and especially talk to ones who are churning. I think that's really interesting. I see who churns on our product and it's like low enough that I can like email them, or we can also automate that. I think that we will eventually. Right now, it's not really a lot, so it's pretty easy to do in one-offs. But I like write them a personal email. Oh, I'm like interested to know like what happened here, and I think that that's always a great conversation. You learn so much in those moments, more than just a survey will tell you. But a survey is a good opener. It's a great way to like get your foot in the door. But I like to dig in a little deeper in a conversation. So just talk to the customer is generally the go-to that I like the best. Another thing, when we were looking at our own situations, like where we feel like engagement was low and we didn't know why, my first questions are, is it because they can't find it? Like, do we have a findability issue? Is it because they can't use it? Is it a usability issue? Or is it because they don't like it? Or it's not like
Yeah.
convincing them that they should, use it. It's not attractive enough. So they're finding it and they're like, "Oh, I could do this, but I don't want to." Right? So that's kind of the 3 questions that I look at. And so even in some of the assumption tests that I had for our next round of work, we're like, "Okay, this engagement is low. Like, which one is it? Let's do some assumption testing." So I go and I talk to our my ideal customer profile. I talk to our customers. I talk to my internal testers, and those are the 3 kind of like the trifecta of groups that I will speak with and try and understand. And it doesn't take that long. Like one poll in one day can get you some good level of market validation on what you're thinking about or what you're trying to prove. So even just having the right audience at your fingertips, I think is a huge advantage for any PM, and PMs who don't have that advantage, I think are going to have to make the bet. And I think that's when you're in the danger zone, when you don't have any way of asking and getting an answer. So feedback is the way, in my opinion.
You're also in a privileged position by running a feedback company, so you can use your own
Yeah.
product.
Oh my God,
That's called
it's so nice.
it's called cheating.
Oh yes, it is. It is. But you know how that goes too. Like it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah,
True.
it's pretty fun. We both have that advantage. It's really great to be able to
Yeah.
use your own drink your own champagne, as we say, like I can use it. I can put a poll out there to, 20 or 30 of my key contacts who are willing to give me fast feedback. And I can say, I just have a quick question for you. We fill this out. And then I can go and look at what was auto tagged and what bubbled up as important and what's the magnitude of the sentiment that people are talking about. And it helps me see more quickly, not just what people are saying, but where I should be paying attention. And I think that's where the real value in these conversations is. It's uncovering that insight that you didn't have before and feeling more confident in your decision making is really the impact that it has on the product person doing the work. So I think we could measure the success of a tool like Usersnap and how confident does someone feel at the end of the day with what they're going forward with.
Yeah, I see the first question from Samantha. I'm gonna put it on on the screen, and she's asking about outliers. Can you
Yeah. So
share
like,
your yeah?
do I take note of outliers? It's funny. It depends on the type of question. So when you're doing like a Kano test and you want to find out is this feature a delight? something they're not expecting and they're like, ooh, look at this? Or is it like a required, which is maybe a little less exciting? Then the outliers are actually really interesting. And they're interesting because they tell us two things. They tell us there's more than one group at work, usually. Because if you get a lot of consensus and then there's like some like big outliers, you can probably make an assumption that you have two cohorts going on. And then you're like, what's that group doing different? Like, what's the circle that makes them different? So I like to look at the outliers and find out, is there a segment of the audience that behaves differently? And then the other thing that I look at in terms of like when someone uses the product in an unexpected way, I think it's like that. I don't know if you know this image where there's like a hill and there's a road, and someone just has walked that shortcut so many times that it makes its own path outside of the road. That's also really interesting. So when you see a use case that you didn't imagine, that you didn't think was important or critical, and you see people using your product to solve a problem that you didn't imagine they would solve it for, that's really interesting. It can be good or bad sometimes. Like there's like, oh, don't do that. That's wrong. Like I see a lot of people using spaces, myself included, as like this is my spot where I put all of my projects. And I think for product people, it's way more interesting to use spaces as a feature, and you have all your projects related to the feature in there. So you can like cross-reference all those different survey types and see the trend in data across bugs and features and CSAT and whatever else you're surveying for. I think it's more interesting to do it that way, but people tend to go like me and mine a lot more. So like how do we analyze that? What do we think about that? How do we adapt our products to the natural behavior of users instead of trying to educate them into our way? I think is a good thing to do as a PM.
Yeah. I think what is also very important that it has to be a pattern in my opinion, right? I give you an example. One of the airtime users, like airtime, it's a product that analyzes recordings with customers and sift through and gives you product feedback. So one of our customers started using it to um, basically analyze his own notes. So what he did was he said it was very time consuming to put down like all his thoughts in a
Hmm.
concise way in writing. So he just recorded, like he made a voice recording of all his thoughts, talked for 15, 20 minutes. He said, that's fine. He doesn't need to structure it. He'll just upload that unstructured train of thought into airtime, and then he will let airtime make sense of that. And the point I want to make is it's an ingenious way to use my product, but at the same time, I didn't think that there was a market for this. That there are like hundreds or thousands of other people who want to use my product this way. So the ideal setup is that you have this outlier, but then you start to notice that more and more people are doing that.
Yeah, so you can discover entirely new customer types, and you can discover entirely new use cases that are super valuable and like ways that you can position the product that you weren't previously thinking of. So I love that example. That's so cool.
Yeah, and just one more point to Samantha. I think back I listened to one of Jared Spool's weekly webinars. That was a long time ago, and he was arguing that the most interesting insights you can get from the fringes of your ICP, because that's where things start to wobble a little bit. And then he said, like, he's purposefully always looking for also people who are in these fringes, and then you can call them outliers.
Yeah, I mean, it tells you also where the boundary is. And so if you look at like engagement, who's engaging and who's not, sometimes if you find people who aren't in your ICP, like we have a strong developer community. They love using us for bug testing, and we love them too. They're awesome. And we're not gonna like just stop building for anything that they might need just because we focus mainly on PMs. We're gonna try and find the cross section. And I think that's another way to use those outliers is like, is there a way to bring it back into the focus point, but facilitate that collaboration with those outliers.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, historic moment. I'm gonna put the next question up there. My dad is in the
Oh,
audience.
Papa's here.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dad.
And exactly, and the salute is right because he's asking about the Eisenhower matrix
Yes.
for categorizing silent killers. He's going back to the earlier part of our discussion where we talked about importance and urgency. What are
Hmm.
your thoughts around that?
So I love a good Eisenhower matrix. Is it important? Is it urgent? Those are both two categories that I look at. So important is like another way of saying impactful, right? They're the
Yeah,
same. So important and urgent. When I look at an Eisenhower matrix, usually I think about it more as a when it should be done and not a if it should be done. Because you don't have that notion of reach and frequency and intensity that's maybe as clear. So you can use this. I would say if you already have a first draft of a backlog where you've said like, yeah, these are all things that make sense to do right now. Using that important filter
yeah.
will help you avoid building a silent killer because you'll be focused on the impact. So, to answer your dad's very good question, yes, it can absolutely help and it should, but you should expand it slightly, in my opinion, because let's use the example. If there's something that's very impactful or very important and it's very urgent, but it only comes up once a year, or it only reaches a very, very small segment, then it's not necessarily gonna have
Yeah.
as big of a bang as you want it to have. So I would say the impact has a couple of other dimensions that you should think about. And if you can build that into your important, then power to you. Awesome. I like to think about them separately because it helps me filter out more things that maybe are lower impact. Like someone can say, this feature is getting this is really common. People say, our biggest customer wants this feature.
Oh yeah.
That's a classic, right? Do I build for the one customer that's worth a huge chunk of my MRR, or do I build this thing that reaches 100 customers? And that's where the back of the napkin really gets interesting. You look at what's this value versus this value. What's the return?
There's a different angle coming from Shahil, who's asking about the impact effort matrix, right? So there's a new dimension here, which is the effort that your team has to put into building something.
Hmm. This is how I use the feasibility actually. So
Yeah,
urgent is like, can it wait? Impactful or important? Is the squeeze worth the juice, essentially? Like, am I going to get the return that I want? Then feasibility, do we have the means? Like, if it's a really big effort, and this is also part of the balancing equation, I look at the relative investment that I want to make to see, am I balancing the investments in the quarter across the cycle that I'm building across like really small investments that are quick wins or really bigger investments that are bigger wins but that take longer to build. So like the effort aspect definitely is something that I look at, but this is why I have 4 dimensions and not 2. I've tried the 4 boxes and I just find that I always end up having some sort of a miss if it's not frequently felt enough or it's not intensely felt enough or if it's not urgent enough or it's not feasible enough in terms of like the effort that we're going to put into it and balancing the ROI of I'm putting time and energy and people's lives are being spent on this. Is it going to be worth it in the end of the day? You have to ask those questions. So my prioritization matrix is a mix of those two plus a little intensity frequency.
yeah, yeah. That's a very, very important point. We're almost at the end of our discussion with Shannon. So if you have any last minute questions, there we go.
Yes, we do.
My wish or your wish is my command. Either way, we have a follow up question from Shahil about the role of designers in your team, and I make the assumption in relation to the silent killers and the process that we talked about.
This could be a rabbit hole. Because
And
there's
especially if your colleagues are listening, like you
Oh
gotta.
no, I love my design team. They're awesome. Mwah. Yeah, I really do. I'm not just like giving lip service. I'll talk about consulting. I have seen design teams be a consulting silent killer. And this is what that looked like. Long iteration times on the designs. Should this button be this big or this big? Should we do it over here, slightly to the right? This iteration is it slows down the business of getting to market a lot. So design people, you amaze me. I cannot do your job. I'm terrible at your job. I would never like attempt to be at your level. However, when you get sometimes really when they're really enjoying their job and they're really in the flow, sometimes they want to iterate forever. And I like have seen this happen in consulting. It doesn't happen at Usersnap because I'm like, get the design done, good enough. Let's go. We'll learn. Let's go to market. So I don't try and get perfect designs. I try and get definitely good enough designs, and our team is really good at that. I'm really grateful for both our central and internal design folks. And when we're doing this in other ways, I've seen it in other companies where it can take like a month to get like a small change done. And I'm like, the time of
Mm-mm.
developers and product people and senior leadership and all the stakeholders that you're vetting this with, like it just, you kill the ROI, you kill your time to market, you kill your innovation time. There's so many negative impacts. So design people, if you want to be a boon to your team, if you want to build their ROI fast, which is the way to growth, quick iterations. Don't nitpick. I know it's hard, but you have to try and get good enough and then learn from the people using it what you missed,
Yeah.
because your idea might not be the best idea.
So
Well,
learn
that's
from
not really good.
learn from analytics, learn from micro feedback or other feedback from your customers if they have any usability issues.
Yeah, the micro feedback is my favorite actually. Just putting a little feature satisfaction or user satisfaction right on the thing. Oh, what did you think about this? What a great way. Kicks NPS's ass, in my opinion. It's so much better than NPS. It tells you about the thing they're doing. Was it the right flow? Was it in the right way? Was it the right cost of effort for them? Was it the right experience for them? Were they missing something? Like you can get so much good feedback in the moment by doing a micro survey that you miss in a user test, or that you miss in an NPS that's like general happiness. So I love a micro feedback on the feature. That's a great way to get good feedback.
And that's also an amazing final word. Shannon, I'm so grateful that you accepted my invitation and you came on this webinar. You shared all your stories and wisdom and matrices and additional spice and take on them. So thanks so much, and also big thanks to the audience for the very insightful questions. Shannon, I wish you the best of luck with Usersnap. It's been the first 6 months, and I'm sure there's like a lot of adventures are ahead of you. So I'll be having an eye on you and Usersnap, and best of luck with the company.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights too. It's been great.
Absolutely, absolutely. For all of those in the audience, if you want to get this recording, please check out my YouTube or LinkedIn. Make sure you hit the follow button, and then you'll be notified. And with that, I'm going to conclude. Wish everyone a nice evening, afternoon, or early morning, depending on where you tune in from. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.
Ciao, ciao.